So welcome to Friday Art Discovery. Today is all about vitamin A, the connection between well-being and art. And we've assembled a wonderful panel today. We have a special guest from outside. That's, I don't know if you received or saw the online, this was our spring 2023 Art Connection, which is where we first talked about the vitamin A, and Kit was wonderful enough to participate in that. So we're going to have a little fun today, and we're going to talk about how art can really impact on so many levels our mental health, our physical health, and our overall well-being. So to your left, I'd like to introduce Kit Cuff. She just told me, like rough. Kit Cuff. Is that right? Okay. Some days I have my moments, but Kit is a wonderful program director for the Mayo Clinic, something near and dear to my heart, for the Center for Humanities in Medicine. So we're happy to have you with us, and you, along with Anna, are involved in curating the collections for the hospital and the clinic. Next to her is Beth Zink, and Beth has a wonderful ability to make people happy with their artwork everywhere, all the time. But certainly you have exhibited in several different hospital settings and have experienced the direct result that the patients and families can enjoy. So we're going to share about that. And right next to me is Cindy Rupert, half of the sculptural felt, along with her husband Brad. Creatives, and they work with felt in three-dimensional wall pieces. Oh, we haven't done any floor pieces yet. What? The sound ladders. Okay, there we go. That's exactly why we're here. So there's a lot of interesting ways that they have discovered that their art, along with the visual ability, has impacted health and wellness. So lots to cover here. So some of the mental health benefits for art is it reduces stress and anxiety. Who's up for that? Yeah, we could all use that. It boosts mood and emotional well-being. A simple example of that is we see people smile all the time when they're walking around the celebration of fine art. Strengthens cognitive function. How many of us could use a little of that? Yeah. I mean, obviously I need it because I get my words tongue-tied. Some of the physical health benefits is it lowers blood pressure and heart rate, and you can really feel that if you sit before a beautiful work of art or a sunset or in anything visual. You can feel the heart rate lower. It boosts the immune system. We can all use a little bit more of that. And supports neuroplasty and brain health. Again, I think we could all use more of that. And many other things, but those are just a few of the top line things that I think about with art. So Kit, I'd like to start with you. If you could share a little bit of your background and how you came to be with the Mayo Clinic.
Well, obviously I got a degree in theater. Yeah, perfect. True story, right? So I grew up in a house that was wired for sound. So there was always music playing, and there was always art being made because my mother, who also has a degree in theater, loved costume design. And she became a fiber artist. And so I knew what it was to put up a show and why you wore white gloves and you didn't touch the artwork. When I was little, right? I'm eating Cheerios under the big quilt frame, and I knew what that was. And I felt so safe under that quilt frame. Like, let's just call that out too. So that's where I started. And then in kindergarten, I started to take dance class. So now I was moving with music, and I was expressing things, and I was learning skills. How am I in a group? How am I part of an ensemble? How am I connecting to the story that we're telling on stage when we're performing? And then I got into music. So I played several instruments growing up. And again, the skills that you learn when you're in school are not just how to take a test, right? So the things that we built through music, the camaraderie, the discovery through making music together, all of these things mattered to me. But then, of course, in our society at least, it was, well, now you have to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, right? You need a job. Well, obviously I can't do art. And isn't that unfortunate that we even consider that? So I explored other things in college, and because I needed a day job, and I wound up in theater. because that's where my heart always was. Now, I knew what the business was like, and the last play I was in was the 4th grade class production of The Wackadoo Zoo, the musical. I was one of many goats, I was amazing. But I stayed away from it for a long time because I knew the business of it, and I forgot the art of it. And so I wound up in my journey through college because we need gen eds. There's a reason why we need general education, why we need to have this more inclusive experience with different types of learning. And so because some theater counted for that, theater history class is where I learned how to write and to connect my thoughts. And then I started to be like, well, what happens if I take acting? Because you have to take acting if you're going to be a theater major. And people have thought I've been doing it for years. I don't know why. But that's where I found my connection to what I wanted to do with my life. Fast forward, I actually did work in a theater for a while, but oh, lo and behold, more work for less pay is what they asked me to do, and I still need to put a roof over my head. And it just so happened that one of our volunteer parents helping with the youth theater program said, well, you need a job, and my friend over at Mayo Clinic needs a patient services representative. And so here's an entry-level position that doesn't need clinical knowledge. They need someone with the proverbial people skills. You need to be able to connect with somebody. You need to be able to both convey and receive information. Well, I'm here to tell you that's what I learned in theater. It wasn't about looking pretty. It wasn't about memorizing someone else's words. It was about telling a story and connecting with an audience. So that's how I wound up at Mayo Clinic. And I did that for a year as a patient services rep. I was in scheduling for a year. And then, and it's a very busy job in scheduling. It's a puzzle. It's how do we get people in for the appointments they need in the order that they need them. And I love that aspect too. But here I was now in an environment that had a commitment to the arts. It is a founding principle of Mayo Clinic, where we are creating an environment where you are welcome and a space where we are fostering healing in all forms. So it wasn't weird that I walked into a space that had a piano in its lobby, that had art on the walls. I didn't think about it because it made so much sense to me. And so when I saw an email that says we're looking for someone in humanities and medicine, I was like, what is that? And I found out that that was a job that connected to everything that my entire life had led up to. So that was a long way of saying that I went from a theater major to what is now the program director for the Mayo Clinic Center for Humanities and Medicine. And along the way, I got a master's degree in project management, wherein the head of that program immediately saw the need because I was running, until I had the fabulous Anna Ackridge as part of the team, I was a one-woman show and I needed to be able to do all the things. Well, that's what they teach you also in the arts, because you have to put on the show both on stage and behind it, right? And so it immediately made sense to that director too, that project management works with that. So now you've got more of those business skills to tie in what are we doing. And now I'm in my 3rd year of a PhD program at Arizona State University in human communication. And I will stop talking.
Well, I think you have nailed the human communication part. You were fabulous. Excellent. And I love this story. I mean, all creativity works together. So all the things. I think I'm going to put that on my card from now on. Yes. What do you do? All the things. Doug, where's Doug? Doug. Hey, can you see if these lights can come on in the middle for the bison and the silver lining? Doug does everything here, isn't he awesome? Yeah, he does all the things. I don't know if I pulled something out of the plug or what, but so thank you for sharing all that. And I have been a patient at Mayo in the past, spent many days at the It's all about connection. Yeah, let there be light. Thank you, Doug. Oh, that's great.
And that was caught on video.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. This is a real place, Working Artist Studios. But I've been a patient at Mayo, and I spent many days at the clinic on on Shea, and in between appointments, I would wander, look at all the art, and listen to the music, and then I spent many more days at the hospital, and I would be, well, first of all, I always had to put stuff in my room, make my room pretty, and have my blankets and pretty pajamas and stuff, and I had music playing, and then I would often wander the halls with my IV looking at art and enjoying the art. So from that perspective, I know how important it is to have that surrounding. And even when I started all that, my husband had to paint my bedroom a certain color. So creating that environment, I think, does a lot for mental and physical health. So Beth, I love your shoes, by the way, fabulous. And you do bring joy all over. You sell your work, you teach artists how to be artists, you share so much fun, and you really found fulfillment when you were able to do the exhibits. And can you talk about that and maybe your mural?
Yes. Hello. That was a hard act to follow, by the way. Anyway, I'm Beth Zink, and I've been painting for a long time, and my most favorite compliment... What? Closer? Okay, my most favorite compliment is, your art makes me happy. And I guess that refers to the dopamine? Yep. Okay. I'm a child of the 60s, just kidding. Anyway, I love the fact that my art makes other people happy. And I was asked many years ago to create a mural for a hospice facility back in 2006, I believe. And it was 10 feet by 15 feet, but it was also about 5 feet off the wall from the ground, from the floor. And so I had to rent a scissor lift so that I could complete this mural. So I spent 2 to 3 weeks out at the hospice facility, and I was kind of the entertainment for the families, and I realized how just my creation of the art entertained people, as it does here at our show, when people love to walk around from studio to studio and see us at work. So that was a really important part of creating the art. And then it was a very peaceful, quiet, serene sort of landscape that I did. Not my usual wild and crazy colorful flowers, but a landscape that I thought would be just a restful sort of piece of art for other people at the entrance of the hospice facility. So that was my first. Then
Nature.
Honor Health found a painting of mine called Happy Trails, which happened to have Thompson Peak in the painting. And they asked me to donate, along with several other pieces. They asked me to donate this piece, and they asked me what the mountain was, and I said, well, it's Thompson Peak. And they said, wow, that's the name of our hospital. They were just building it, by the way. And they said, that's the name of our hospital, and we'd love for you to donate it to us. It was 5 feet by 4 feet. I'd already donated 4 other pieces to them, and I said, I like you, but not quite that much. So they found another donor, and we shared the donation. Last but not least was the more recent rotation I had at the Mayo Clinic out on Shea in 2021, and I have heard so many people since that in the last 4 years who have said, wow, I was walking up and down the hallways just like Susan, and how much joy your paintings brought to me. So all's good. Whenever you have art in public places, it's a wonderful thing. But for medical facilities, I always think that art takes your brain on a little vacation. Sometimes it's a familiar vacation, sometimes it's an imaginary vacation, but it always provokes just your thoughts. And so for those people who are ill, or those people who are families of those who are ill, what a wonderful thing art can do for them, just as, while they're there.
100%, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. And Sunday, you and Brad have an extremely unique art form to begin with. And there's so many ways in which it's serving, but recently and included in our vitamin A article, there were some recently discovered benefits to it, and from sound dampening to we've discovered how your work has impacted positively those on the autism spectrum, and in addition to just the joy that you get from looking at it and visually seeing it. So talk a little bit about all of that, if you will, your favorite parts of that, and the impact you wish to make.
So when we discovered the felt, for 15 years we did a very different body of work that was also very inspirational, and it was all found object. We've been found object sculptors for over 25 years. And I have to follow up on your comment about your art makes me happy. I have literally had people come in our studio and say, is it okay if I tell you that your art makes me happy? And I'm like, yes, that's our goal. And it's like they feel like that an artist has to be tortured in order to create good art. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess that's what your idea of good art is, which that's subjective, so whatever. But that's our goal, is to make everyone happy. And when we discovered the felt, so I'll just start with my little spiel that I give everybody. This is our art supplies. We rescue the remnant that's trimmed off the brim from a friend who's a hat maker in Colorado, Greeley Hat Works. Yes! Yay, Greeley! So these all went in the landfill for over 100 years. Our friend is the third owner of Greeley Hat Works. And 11 years ago, we virtually made them a zero waste company by rescuing we rescue everything they throw away except for their paper products. And when my husband, Brad, standing back there, first picked this up, I looked at him and said, I don't understand what you're thinking. There's nothing here. It's a circle. And he was like, just let me take a bag of it home and see what I can come up with.
And it's heavy, right?
It is heavy. And so we did a very simple crow, and then we did a feather, and then we did a rooster. And when we did that rooster, we knew we were really onto something. And then we came here, and the very first year, 2021, everybody's masked with COVID and all of that. And this wonderful couple walks in our booth who happen to be Alzheimer's researchers, and they said, we're hoping you can help us solve a problem. And they go on to tell me that they've opened up their Biltmore area home into an open floor plan, and the architect had always planned on them having felt art that she was going to provide, she was going to make, in their home to dampen the sound. And she fell ill and couldn't finish the project. And she was hoping.
And wasn't it all like concrete floors, concrete?
Everything.
Yeah.
And they didn't want rugs, they didn't want to trip on rugs, they had no curtains, it's just the furniture. And then they built a giant metal fireplace for Myron's pots and Carlos's pieces. And they needed to dampen sound on that because it was reflecting echo crazy. So we ended up making about 15 pieces. And just when we went over to meet with them, initially we brought maybe a half a dozen pieces into the house. And, we were around the dining room table, which was in the middle of the big great room. And Pierre said, I can tell there's a difference already. Because it takes that tinny sound out of the air. And when people are in our studio, I always, if they ask, I'm like, stand in here, close your eyes, and pay attention to what's up here. And it's warm and cozy and inviting in our space. And you walk out in the hall and do that exercise again, and it's like chaos up above.
We call it energy.
Energy. Creative chaos. Creative chaos. So that was just a light bulb moment. I literally felt like a cartoon character going, oh, our art is functional. So then we started researching that more and more. And as I got into that, we have a client who has a 20-something autistic nonverbal son. And I contacted her and I asked if she'd noticed any difference. since they have a piece that's a little bit bigger than that orange orb that we have over there. And she said, as a matter of fact, I cannot make any claims because he can't tell me, but what I notice is that he no longer wears his noise-canceling headphones at home. I get emotional every time because it's like, I had no idea when we found trash that was gonna, with the hole in the middle. That really got us thinking that we could make a difference in this world with what we do. And there's just so much more that we want to do to get into, hospitals and hospice situations, and we'd like to create a mobile sensory den that we could take around to, art shows and concerts, and because when you have a neurodivergent child, and the families of neurodivergent children are very isolated. They never feel like they can go anywhere because you don't know when somebody's going to get overstimulated, and so it's like make a warm, inviting environment that they can just calm down and change a diaper, do whatever you need to do. I mean, how do you take an adult and change a diaper in a porta potty, at a outdoor venue? I have more ideas than there's time in the world. But anyway, it's just been an amazing gift, and we're just so thankful that we're here.
And that's like a little happy accident. You're creating beautiful work, and then you discover all these other benefits to it. So it's very important. Thank you. Awesome. So, Kit, what is involved, and how did Mayo get so devoted to having art as part of the surroundings? And again, there's the visual art, and there's the music, and and other health industries are too. But Mayo, I think, really raised the bar, and kind of, why is it so important?
Well, I like to say that that's a founding principle that goes back more than 150 years. So when we think about what hospitals were many, many moons ago, and in some places still, they are stark, they are cold, they are unwelcoming, and some people still think of them as places to go to die. Not to put too fine a point on it. Happy Friday afternoon, everybody. But if you think about that kind of idea is so antithetical to healing that then you have people who are starting to think of what compassion means as related to medicine. Enter the Mayo brothers, right? And importantly, a group of dynamic nuns. So I won't go into all of Mayo's history. Tyson would love it if you came by and hung out in the historical unit for a while. But that is a very important founding principle to an organization that is dedicated to hope and healing. So when you immediately think of the first buildings that were what would become Mayo Clinic, these were spaces that were intentionally designed not only to be safe for patient care, but also to promote healing. So the attention to detail in what those spaces looked like mattered. So we start there with what those facilities are, and then you get into, these are the kinds of people who have come together in service to humanity. So we are constantly thinking about the work that we do, how else we can care, and what it means to be human. Fast forward to the 80s, and that was before the southern sites here in Arizona and also in Jacksonville, Florida. So we're still in Rochester, Minnesota. Particularly the psychiatry department said, I think theater might be beneficial to us. So they started what's called the Insight series, which was a series of basically staged readings where they brought in actors, they looked at certain plays, and now we're talking about characters and how they interact and what is going on in their lives that affects their health. Now we're fostering empathy through those stories, and we're thinking about what it means to be human. And that is how the Center for Humanities and Medicine really grew out of this founding principle. To something that we now have a name for as that center. There are 3 centers, one in Rochester, one in Jacksonville, and one here. I'm very proud to say that I'm the longest serving staff member of Humanities and Medicine in all of those 150 years. Because I just love this work, and my world gets bigger every day. And so that's how that grew. We're really the marriage of 2 professional fields, arts and healthcare, which is what you will think of more presentationally when we think about arts in galleries as wayfinding, performances in public places, and then we get into things like arts at the bedside and creative arts therapy. They are not the same thing. Find me later, I'll explain. And then we get into more of the things that are in the health humanities realm, which are the more academic sides, the things like visual thinking strategies and narrative medicine, where we are training our clinicians, our healthcare workers, to use what we know through the arts and what we can learn and explore through the arts in service to patient care. So in addition to the beautifully designed spaces, that is a culmination of our architects, our interior designers, our building services and facilities crews who are maintaining those spaces and are thinking about those designs, and then enter in a permanent collection, which is not under our purview because the center's real busy with 18 galleries of rotating artwork. And there is a distinction there on purpose, because there is certain art that makes sense in a hospital, and then there's art that should exist in the world, but is not necessarily appropriate in that space and time. So you have to be real intentional with a permanent piece of artwork, but you get to play more with a rotating gallery. And that's how we can bring in much more art, how we can bring in lots of different voices, and a lot of them are in this room or seated next to me or over there.
I'm not
Heidi
rotator, not
and Anton.
Where's Anton? Yep.
And we're talking with Beth later. And so by having all of those different spaces, which are in the plan whenever we expand to have more galleries, and then we have a concert series where we are bringing in professional musicians in addition to our amazing roster of volunteer piano players. So there's always live music happening in addition to recorded music for that space. And then we're talking about music, creative writing, visual arts, theater, and flamenco, thank you very much, at the bedside with our inpatients. And then we're moving into the medical school, the School of Health Sciences, continuing professional development, where we are creating curriculum where there are classes, there are workshops, there are standalone activities, there are special events for our learners and our staff members to engage in throughout their career, so they never lose sight of what it means to be human. Because if we think about biomedicine in itself, you know, this whole idea of the arts are over here and the sciences are over here. They are entirely intertwined. And as I like to say, because especially in a technological age where everybody is so caught up on being innovative, innovation is the key. You cannot innovate if you are not creative. So when I hear artists talk about, I didn't know that my art served this purpose or could do these things. What an amazing discovery. But also, isn't that at the core of who we are as people, right? And you should pay your artists, please, and thank you. So if you come
Say it louder.
Did you get that back? Of course, I have a limited amount of resources, but there is a budget behind what we do, and there are generous benefactors who have supported our work, which makes more work possible. But if we think about having a space that is a professional environment, we do the best we can to provide that for our artists free of charge. You are not renting a gallery space with us. And should an art piece be sold, we are not agents of sale, but we offer the information. So if someone sees a piece of art, connects with it, wants to talk more with an artist, we want that conversation to happen. And then 100% of that sale should go to the artist. When we can provide a stipend to our artists who are performing, we're doing that. If we're building curriculum together with our artists who are coming in and offering their labor, their expertise, we support that the best way we can, because that is all part of the work we do.
I think another thing that's important in art in all different forms being incorporated into healthcare is for the healthcare providers, the doctors, the nurses, the support team. What a challenging, stressful position, and they deal with a lot of heavy emotions, and I would think that the impact of visual art, maybe some of you could chime in here, but Beth.
I have a collector who bought a few pieces from me several years ago and said, I said, where are you going to put them? And she said, I'm going to put them in my bathroom. Okay, that's fine. I don't care where people put my art if they want it, wherever it makes them happy. And she said it was really important to me when I'm in my tub after work. I said, well,
Some of my favorite art is in my bathroom.
I said, you don't mind my asking, what kind of work do you do? She said, I'm a hospice nurse. And, immediately understood. Well, the story goes on. When my mother-in-law was dying back in Ohio the next year, I contacted this hospice nurse because my husband had flown back and no one in the family knew what to do with mom, but they knew she didn't have long to live. I contacted her and I said, my mother-in-law is dying, my husband doesn't know what to do, the family doesn't know what to do, she does not want to leave the house, she does not want to be transported to a hospital. And she said, do you have a fax machine? And she faxed me a list of the do's and do nots for people who are dying. And for example, if they don't want water, don't give them water. I mean, anyway, we learned a lot from that, and it was, I just thought of that. I mean, that relationship with her, I helped her, and then she helped me years later. It's kind of wild.
Yeah,
Well, it's all about connection. It's all about connection. And Heidi, can you come over here and share the story that you shared? Yeah. You know our motto: be ready for anything, anytime, anywhere.
So I had an exhibit at the hospital near the emergency room, and one of my collectors sadly had a situation where they were in the emergency room. They were being rolled into the emergency room. She was terrified. Her husband was walking along with her. She was holding his hand, and she looked over and saw one of my pieces, and she goes, "Oh my God, honey, is that a Heidi Rosner?" And he stopped the gurney and looked and said, "Yeah, it is." And she goes, "I'm going to be okay."
Isn't that great? Yeah. And I know Jenny Foster is also in hospital settings, and there is something soothing when you connect with a piece of art. And I know we've had people in here who've experienced that. And I'm just really grateful that Mayo has made it such a key part. It almost makes you want to go to the hospital, but not really. But if you're there, you appreciate, yeah. No, I'm kidding. We can go visit. But also, did the bird finally make it out of the
it comes in and out.
Susan, I have a piece that the piece Happy Trails hangs next to the grand piano. It's a player piano, nobody's in it. Anyway, it sits in the lobby at Thompson Peak Hospital. And when I'm going through my book of work and a client says, "Oh, that's a really beautiful piece," I would say, "I hope you never have to see it because it's in the hospital."
Well, that's true. But if they have to be there, we want them to enjoy something. The other thing that has come up with your work is, again, more on the autistic, is we're not allowed to touch this if we don't own it, but isn't it great for autistic or visually impaired? And how many of you ever saw the work of Willa Cather? Am I saying that right? She did the Touch Me, Please Touch.
Yeah.
She did the life casting. Willa Shallot, Jean Shallot's daughter. So about, it's probably been 30 years or more that my stepmom was with the Scottsdale Artist School, and they had Willa Shallot would come out and do classes for people on life casting. But she had an exhibit that her sole purpose was for vision impaired people to be able to come and touch and experience and feel the works of art. Are you familiar with her work at all?
Not that name, but that kind of work is so impactful for people who are experiencing art differently. And also I think that the venue and the context and the people involved matters, right? So when we think about the respect that we have for art, we know not to touch it, right? We know to take photos with permission. We think of it in terms of fine art in many spaces, and then there are times when, by all means, right, clap in the middle of a symphony if the music moved you. Touch the art if there's an invitation to touch the art, because there is something about when things are tactile, or when you cannot experience it in the way an ableist society just assumes you can. So when we get into that sort of art for art's sake, right, has a lot to do, and it goes back to why it's important for clinicians, for healthcare workers, to also be engaged in art, even if they do not define themselves as artists, and that's really important. Because I always go, okay, who in here is an artist? And everybody's just like, how can I make myself smaller? And I say, who here is human? And they're like, oh wait, that's me. Yes, because when we're thinking about ways to express ourselves, or to play with an idea, to explore something, to try to understand something that is difficult or complex, that's what the arts do, right? So if we're trying to tell a story, if we're trying to figure out something that has just been eaten at us for a while, and there's no other way in sort of that usual product-driven format. But if we can spend some time in color, right? Have you ever listened to a painting? You can do that, right? When you spend time with it and if you think about it differently. So sometimes, yes, it is our business, and other times it is our way to move through the world.
I always think, speaking of color, I always think about color as evoking all kinds of emotions. And, a painting that is, say, a landscape with real pale or subdued colors has that rest, like I talked about earlier, has a different sort of emotion from something that's so vibrantly colored. That they both bring out emotions, but very differently. And so I think the variety in a collection for any sort of a facility would be good, because not everybody wants to feel restful when they're in a hospital. Maybe they want something that's loud or crazy, or they can just hide themselves in it. Maybe an abstract where they can't quite figure it out, but it gives them something to do besides think about being in a hospital.
And I feel color. I do. I feel color. I feel texture. I mean, we installed a piece of ours on Wednesday, and I knew at the minute it was up, and she walked in the bedroom, and her reaction gave me goosebumps. And it's just like, you literally feel it. That's what we always talk about when we do commissions. It's like, I want it to be the right size, the right color, the right everything. And I do all that ahead of time in Photoshop, so that I always tell everybody, none of us in this tent do things that are inexpensive. We want you to love every single piece you take home. And the last thing I want you to do is like hear the price is right. Wah, wah, wah. Like, it's not quite big enough, or it's not the right color, or I wanted it brighter, or whatever. It's like all of us can work with people, and everybody feels things differently. I mean, it's just, and when you were talking about the touching, at this show, we don't really mind if people touch our work, because they're not walking around with like turkey legs and cotton candy and, all the things at a street show. One of my favorite stories was when we were doing Fort Worth Main Street, and we had a bigger bison than that one is. And there's a dad, and he's standing there. His kids were being so good, and he's going, "Don't touch the art." And I go, did you hear your words? I mean, did you hear what you're saying? Because look what your hand is doing. But it's so hard not to. And I get that, which is why we do provide a small piece for people to touch, but we also say we want you to pet yours all day long once you get it home, because it is an incredible therapeutic thing. And with the neurodivergent community, you know, we've got that covered as well. I mean, whether it's just like having, you know, when you have a dog come into a hospital,
Yeah.
it's petting, it's touching, and the way Brad cuts the felt in so many different ways to get all these different textures out of nothing more than this constantly amazes me what he can come up with, and they all feel different.
Absolutely. And can you share the inspiration for your bison?
So this bison, I call him the we've got eyes bigger than our schedule kind of guy, because he was cut out. We do a wood subsculpture underneath of everything, because each piece of felt is individually nailed into the carved wood base. And we had Brett got the carving done 5 to 8 years ago, I think. And it just kept getting shoved back on the shelf because we didn't have time to work on that. We had to do a commission. We had to do, you know, replace some small things that sell more easily, whatever. And I said, we're taking that bison to Celebration and we're working on it and finishing it when we get there. And this summer, I'm scrolling through Facebook, and the wonderful Judy Dickinson posts this painting she did. And I'm like, that is the same composition of this bison that we've had cut out for 5 to 8 years. But the magic of this painting is the blue highlights in the fur. And it just, again, like I said, I feel color. It just moved me. And I was like, this is what we need to use for our inspiration for this piece. So I don't know if you can see from a distance, but when you come up close, a lot of this dark brown felt has the blue highlights in it, and it just makes it sing. I mean, this is probably the 4th bison we've done. This one doesn't even come, I mean, the others don't come close to this guy.
And we can pass that around.
Yeah.
Yay, Judy. And
Yay,
I
Judy.
love
Yeah, he's very fluffy. And the horn is everybody always asks me about the horn, so I'll just answer the question. It's wood that's, I collaged strips of old vintage general store ledgers and then painted over the top of that. So it gives you that ridge of the horn.
We should give a shout out to Brad for all the cutting it. He's got some very strong hands. He's the only man I know that has a scissor holster. He's super cool. He walks around. You need scissors? He's got them. And we used to make him work in the back lot. You might have noticed we added these cool containers in the middle.
That is the Creative Container Courtyard.
Yep, that's what it is. And all of the messy, loud people that need to create, that's where you're going to find them. So you can go out and watch the messy, loud, cool kids in the Creative Container Courtyard. Very good. So, I don't know. I think there's lots of research that has been done of the impact of art and well-being in different methods, but the only measuring stick I need is to watch people walk around here. And, you know, you all keep coming back every Friday or, you know, over and over again, because why? Because it makes you happy. You love it here. I mean, it creates that emotion. And it's a joy to walk around. Like I was cutting through, talking to Robin Branham, and this guy comes around the corner with a big, huge smile on his face. He's like, I just knew instantly I love that piece. And he had another piece of paper in his hand for something else. And he had just commissioned his 98 and 94-year-old parents. Well, he commissioned an artist to paint his 98 and 94-year-old parents. And it was just, he was so happy. So, I mean, happy. We like happy. I would love to hear if we have questions or, you know, personal experiences from our group here today, if you want to share anything. I'm going to start right here.
Like Susan, I spent quite a bit of time in the Mayo Clinic and at home in home hospice. And there are several things I remember. One is the hospital bed was set up in our living room, and we didn't know any of this was going to happen. But straight out the window was the most beautiful bougainvillea I've ever seen. And every spring, the flowers would be that big, and pretty soon, every morning, the first thing I did was look at the bougainvillea and see what had happened overnight. The second thing was about 90 degrees, 45 degrees to my right, was a beautiful, beautiful primitive painting made up in Cape Dorset, which is way above the Arctic Circle. There were no trees, no wood, no nothing. The artist used local rock the way you would make a lithograph. They used a hatchet to make notches in it, put primitive paints on it, and made these paintings. And this painting I bought probably 40, 50 years ago, and it's a beautiful mother owl with the happiest smile on her face, and 3 little owlets down below, all waving at you. And that was the second thing I looked at, and that was my life for about 9 months, was plotting the bougainvillea and making sure my owl was happy. And I also want to say that art is lovely when it's graphic, but when you're around and can't move, things like a hummingbird nest that you can see out your window, or a pair of mating doves that come there every day, or some friendly little squirrel that comes up and snitches food out of your bird feeder. These are all, to me, art. And my wife and I worked with kids for many years. We had a lovely little small office with 4 exam rooms. And fortunately, our daughter-in-law is a very talented artist. And she came in and painted the most wonderful cartoons of kid-type characters, appropriate probably 2 to 4 years, all along the room. But they weren't up here. They were down at 3 or 4 feet. So as the toddlers come toddling in, the first thing they would go over, and we couldn't say, don't touch that, because that's the first thing they did, was touch it. And we photographs, we had children from all over the world as we traveled, and it became a very integral part of our life and remains so today. Sorry to take so long, but it's something I feel very strongly.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, come on over here, Sher. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have a bond. Yeah, we do. Sherry Meldrum, fabulous artist and
weaver. I have a kind of great story. I was commissioned, and I have a piece in your permanent collection, and it's in Building 3 in the main elevator bank. Anyway, my husband was treated for leukemia at Mayo, and all the weeks that we went there for all the transfusions and the different things that he had to go through, I was working on this weaving during that time. And when it finally got installed, just before his last treatment, which was wonderful because the nurse, his really great nurse, smuggled us up onto the added floors on top of Building 3, which we weren't supposed to be in yet because they weren't open, and showed us the installation, and I got to take pictures of him there. So the nurses at Mayo are incredible. They were wonderful to him. They treated him really wonderfully, and I love having that piece there because it reminds me of him so much, but I love having the piece in your permanent collection. So that was my story with Mayo.
Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, what great memory and great placement of that. So, the power of art. We talk about it every week, but it's just really, it's personal and it's for everybody, and it makes the world a better place, I think.
One last thing I was going to say about the hospice installation. The nurses there were so wonderful, and I know what you're talking about. how it takes a special person to be a hospice nurse. And so they would stop by every day and say, "Oh, Beth, let me see what you've completed today." And I was kind of, just part of the entertainment for a few weeks. And I said, "What you do is so special, I can't imagine," because they're saying, "Oh, you're so talented, you're an artist, you could do this." And I said, "Hey, you have a talent that I couldn't begin to have, but can I gift you something? How many of you would like to learn to paint?" And they all said, "Well, we sure would." So I made the arrangement, and I offered a little painting class, a little 3-hour painting class, and all the hospice nurses came, and we did a simple little landscape, but it just brought so much joy to them. It was really fun, and it was a thank you from me to them.
That's so good. I just want to mention something else about touch, that I have this concept in my head that I've not been able to get out yet. But one of the things when we very first started working with the felt was I was so enthralled with the touch. And the more I researched it, if you really think about today's world, we touch glass all the time. Your phone is glass, you go to the bank, you've got glass in between and all this. It's just, everything is just so like cold and slick, and then COVID came. And it's like, now you can't touch anything. You can't hug anybody. You can't, and humans need touch so bad. I mean, just a simple hug can change a person's day. And this visual that I have is like creating a giant thumbprint, because thumbprint represents touch, and cover a portion of it with glass, but make the felt coming through the glass, because it's just needing to touch. It needs to be touched. You need to be touched. It's just, we need to get past the glass screens and all of the things that separate us, and touch each other and enjoy each other. And art can do all of that.
Yeah, I think that's, first of all, I can't wait to see that piece. I think it's really important to remember those ideas of isolation and truths and how we move through the world, because sometimes I think the conversation about arts and health in particular gets funneled into that prescriptive space. If you listen to this music, you will feel better. And sometimes, in fact, quite often, that is true. But there are larger truths about well-being and connection that the arts are uniquely qualified to help us navigate, and should be at the forefront, not an afterthought, and not squeezed out in the name of other things going on in the world.
Art isn't just a want, it is a need.
Yeah.
I mean, we always feel like what we do when times get tough, people give up the wants. They don't buy the wants, they buy the needs. But this environment right here proves to every single one of us, it is a need. We all need it. You don't maybe necessarily need another thing from Amazon, but you need art.
One of the other things I didn't really talk about is that we are grateful to be able to support Free Arts for Abused Children of Arizona. We donate to them, and we ask visitors to bring art donations to them, and the work that they do with children who've gone through trauma is incredibly important. And I think everybody's suffered trauma at some level. I mean, so being able to experience art, to create art, take some art classes, look at art, listen to art, go to the theater, there's so much value. And like you said, look outside. I mean, nature filled with beauty. There's you can see art in everything. Last week, Becky talked about, about Dan Romero's sculptures, and not just the sculptures being art form, but the way the shadows and the reflections, and you really, it's everywhere. It's all around us. Is there a question?
It's for Kit. How do you decide the type of artwork that you bring into Mayo? Because I know that there's a lot of research into just with interior spaces and bringing biophilic elements in nature. And they say that if you can't have a view of the desert like that or have a bison in your living room, that the next best thing is to have art that depicts that. So how do you choose what goes into Mayo?
Yeah, that's a great point and question. And I love the idea of the vacation and the imagined and the real, and there's so much to just that. I shouldn't say just, because that's a lot. Yes, there are very specific guidelines for our loaned artwork program for specific reasons, right? So we're thinking about a very public place in the sense that we have more than just our staff in those spaces, right? So we are welcoming in our patients and their loved ones. So it needs to have some element of some universality to it. That being said, things that you may not think of, we don't do a lot of still life with food, for example, because some of our patients might be fasting or nauseous. How about it? Yeah. And we might not have things that are real frenetic, right? So we don't want to do something that might affect someone who's having some equilibrium issues, if someone's dealing with dizziness. So that element might be a little too overwhelming. If we're thinking about anything that would suggest a body part, anything that looks diseased or dark, we tend to steer away from those. But that being said, we do want to include a lot of diversity in medium and content, and that's that strength of the loaned artwork program. So we're able to bring in so many more voices, different kinds of content, things that perhaps we might think that there are book covers walking around and we have judged them, and you just never know what's going to strike someone as they're walking down the hall and they see this particular piece on this particular day, and it will just resonate in ways that are probably unexpected. And then there are the times that there's some real connection and we disappoint people by taking down that exhibit. But then we're putting something new in there. And so the sort of ownership of the program that is so shared with our audience, with our staff, with our learners, with our patients first and foremost. So there's that familiarity, and then there's that sense of something new. So that also benefits people who are here long term for extended care or are indeed working in that space, because things tend to fade into the background, especially when you have a complex role or you're dealing with complex diagnoses, where that becomes your focus and you're not noticing what's outside if you can be outside. You're not noticing the art that might be on the walls because it's the same thing, right? But when we change that up, now there's some new stimulus. There's something new to be thinking about, to explore, to spend some time with, that might hit you in a different way. So I think that's all really important too. So that's why we want that variety in there. But we do have a committee that reviews all of the artwork. So it is juried in. We'll ask for a portfolio that's representational of the work, so we can get a sense of it. And then Anna is so incredible in the work that she does to manage all of those 18 galleries, which is unique at Mayo Clinic across the board. We're the only facility that has that many rotating galleries. And to be able to work with that artist with their available inventory, what makes sense in the time, in this space, because they're all different sizes and in different locations. So some elements that will work really well in one space aren't going to translate to others. So we're really intentional also about what we're putting in each specific gallery.
Yeah, that's great. And how does one? How do you find your artists? Do you invite people to submit, or do you curate specifically, or should we send people your way?
All of the above.
They found me here.
Well, what a great way to find artists. Yeah.
Yes. So we've people have seen art in the space and they're wondering how we do that, so they'll reach out to us. Games of telephone, where we start with one and their circles will then learn about the program that way. We will be in spaces such as this and we'll invite people. So we're happy for anybody who is interested in the program to learn more and see if it's a good fit. It isn't always, because again, that focus is really on giving back to the space, being in that, fostering that element of truly connection and presence and fostering hope and healing. Whereas it is not that business mindset. That being said, things happen. So we're glad for that too, and we would love as much variety and when people have available inventory and it works in the space.
That's wonderful. And we have 2 artists here who have spouses that work at Mayo. Yeah, maybe more. That's what I know. But thank you so much, Kit, for bringing your expertise and your insight for all of us, and Beth, for your happy joy, and Sunday for all your discoveries and how art impacts people. And thank all of you for being here, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.